quien no veo hace muchísimos años y en gran medida pues tuve el privilegio de participar con él en esa primera cumbre de las Américas. Eh, voy a pasar al inglés para poder responderle mejor a Richard y así entrar en la conversación con todos. Eh, en primer lugar, let me say the following, Richard. It's always, that old distinction between an optimist and a pessimist that that often is alluded to, which is, an optimist is a pessimist with information, right? And I would love to say that is the case in with you, uh, given your extraordinary experience, your extraordinary amount of influence that you've had over several administrations. That said, however, I have to, in some measure, contradict many of the things that you have said this afternoon, even though I welcome this optimism in a hemisphere that is extraordinarily complex. But let me just say the following, and I'm going to focus specifically on the Biden administration. Just, analyzing this administration involves understanding a series of very complex and dynamic factors that intertwine both with recent history, geopolitical changes, and the internal challenges of the region. And so I would say that, this administration in particular has been, like all, right? It's been affected by the context that it inherited, this post-Cold War or whatever you want to call it framework, and the current challenges of the region. And so let me just simply say that over this historical framework, if you will, really has to deal with the following, and that is, in the first place, after the end of the Cold War, we experienced very significant changes with very important transitions to democracy in several nations. But as several of my colleagues have already pointed out, right, I strongly disagree with you, Richard, that liberal democracy is fine. I think that liberal democracy is threatened in the region by both the right and the left. This isn't an ideological discussion. This is the trend, and it's an overwhelming trend away from liberal democracy in the context in which an administration is still about promoting democracy, not only in Latin America, but worldwide. And in large measure, of course, I would even go as far as saying that liberal representative democracy is also fundamentally challenged, even in the United States and in other parts of the world. And so when we look at this in a more global sense, right, representative democracy appears to be in a very, very I won't say dire straits, but certainly severely weakened. And in the region, and let me be very, very brief here. There are five things that I'm going to address very quickly that I think in some measure challenge your optimism. One is, as my colleagues have said, we have historically been about preventing the presence of extra hemispheric actors. Yet today, it's probably true that the presence of extra hemispheric actors is extraordinary, much more than we really understand. The presence of Russia, the presence of China, and the presence of Iran in throughout the region. Secondly, as I was saying, the fighting against the expansion of authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a major current in the region. And here, Luis Fleischmann praised President Bukele. I'm not so sure that we ought to be praising this trade-off between security and rights, even though they may be effective. But it's not a question of effectiveness versus legitimacy. It's really something that the hemisphere has stood for over the past, at least since 1994, which is the promotion of liberal democracy. Third, the penetration of organized crime. I don't think we fully understand how deep organized crime, the penetration of organized crime has been. I don't think there's a single country in the region that is not undergoing some kind of challenge. And this linkage, especially between drug trafficking and organized crime, that has essentially led to a collection of failures, Ecuador being one, but one country that we have completely neglected and we've completely forgotten about that is Haiti, right here, an hour away.
Un minuto.
Okay, I'll finish. And then, and this leads to the real issue in the region, Richard, which is the enormous presence of collapsing, some might even call them failed states, right? And our inability now to work with these so-called failed states. And Haiti again is the extreme case, but there are others. I mean, maybe even countries like Venezuela and should be considered in that particular realm. And then finally, of course, the thing that's affecting every single country in the region, and which the U.S. has been showing dramatically an inability to deal with the challenges of mass immigration and the humanitarian crisis. It's not just the 8 million Venezuelans. It's now the large-scale migration of Colombians, the large-scale migration of Ecuadorians, the presence of Chinese immigrants and others all going through Latin America. And in every single instance, immigration has become that old word that we used to use in international relations. This is now an intermestic factor that has become a huge challenge to democratic governance throughout the region. So let me end there. And again, I really appreciate your optimism. But I think that we may be looking at a very different continent.